She thought she was the one playing him, the perfect wife with a secret lover, spending his millions behind his back. But what Vanessa didn't know was that her husband had already divorced her months ago, in silence. And when she finally reached for the $400 million they'd built together, the account was gone, emptied by the man she thought she'd fooled. She believed she was untouchable, cheating with his doctor, mocking him, and living off his empire. But while she flaunted another man in secret, he built a plan so quiet, so perfect, that by the time she found out she was divorced, her signature was already old, and her fortune already gone. He had given her everything: loyalty, a home, children he thought were his. She repaid him with betrayal, lies, and a lover who called himself their family friend. But the moment she laughed in his face, she didn't know the truth. The divorce papers had long been signed, and the money she thought was hers had disappeared with him. While she thought she was 2 steps ahead, he was already miles beyond. She called him boring, weak, predictable, until the morning she found every account frozen, every asset gone, and his calm, cold smile on every headline that read, "Billionaire husband outsmarts cheating wife in secret divorce." She walked into court ready to destroy him. Expensive lawyers, fake tears, and a story rehearsed to perfection. But when the judge opened the DNA results, and the husband revealed the divorce had been finalized months earlier, the courtroom went silent. Her world collapsed, and his revenge was complete. The Caldwell residence glittered under the soft hum of the city. From the outside, it looked like a love story sculpted in marble, the kind of home where dreams lived. Through the glass wall of the living room, Ethan Caldwell sat beneath a warm amber light, reviewing his company's quarterly performance on his MacBook. The quiet rhythm of the clock was broken only by the clicking of Vanessa's heels on the marble floor and the faint chime of her laughter from across the hall. She wasn't laughing at anything he'd said. Draped in a silk robe, phone in hand, Vanessa paced near the window overlooking the pool. Her reflection flickered across the water surface, smiling, whispering, glowing. "No, baby, he's still in his office. Same old Ethan," she said, her tone soft and sweet, dripping with the kind of affection she no longer gave her husband. Ethan didn't need to hear the words clearly. He'd learned to read tone the way other men read spreadsheets. Precisely, painfully. He froze, eyes fixed on the page before him, though he hadn't processed a single number. The omniscient silence of the house, the soundproof calm of success, was now an accomplice to betrayal. A few feet away, their 10-year-old son Caleb built Lego towers on the rug. "Dad, can I show you my spaceship?" he asked. Ethan smiled, but his voice caught. "Of course, champ." He turned, feigning focus, while Vanessa slipped into the hallway, whispering, "I'll call you after he sleeps." She was gone before the sentence ended. Ethan's gaze drifted to a family portrait on the wall. Him, Vanessa, and their 3 children, all in white linen, laughing at the beach. He remembered the day vividly. Vanessa had insisted they retake the photo 12 times until her hair felt just right. The perfection she wanted for the world had always come at the cost of what was real. Outside, rain began to drizzle, streaking against the tall glass panels. He rose slowly and walked to the edge of the living room, where the city lights reflected against the downpour. His mind raced back to the early years, the nights he coded until dawn while Vanessa slept, the day he surprised her with her first Mercedes, the way she cried when he bought her the house she'd dreamed of since childhood. Every memory was now under question. He turned toward her vanity table across the room. Her phone buzzed once, lighting up with a message before fading to black. Julian Cross. The name alone felt like static in his ears. Julian, their family doctor, their close friend. He'd delivered their second child. Ethan's jaw tightened. His fingers hovered over the phone for a split second, but he stopped. No, that's what she would expect. Confrontation, emotion, proof of jealousy. Instead, he smiled faintly, the kind of smile a chess player wears when he finally sees the pattern. Later that night, Vanessa returned to the bedroom. She slipped beside him, the scent of expensive perfume blending with rain-soaked air. "You're still awake?" she asked, tracing a finger along his shoulder. "Just thinking about work," he murmured. "You work too much," she teased, resting her head on his chest. "We should plan a trip to Capri. Julian says we'd love it there." Ethan's heart froze mid-beat. Julian again. Always Julian. But he said nothing. He ran his hand gently through her hair. Steady, calm, unreadable. "Maybe we should," he replied softly. When she drifted into sleep minutes later, Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The quiet tick of the clock counted down the last seconds of the man who once believed love was enough. He reached for his iPad on the nightstand and opened a blank document titled, simply, Plan. Underneath, he typed the first line. Never confront, observe, prepare. When she thinks she's ahead, make sure she's already behind. He pressed save, closed the device, and turned off the light. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the skyline as Vanessa murmured another man's name in her sleep. Ethan turned his face toward the darkness. Eyes open, heart steady. The war had already begun. She just didn't know it yet. The next morning unfolded like any other. Sunlight washing over marble, the faint scent of coffee drifting through the kitchen, and Vanessa humming to herself as she scrolled through her phone. She wore the same effortless confidence of a woman who believed the world would never dare betray her. But across the table, Ethan Caldwell studied her in silence. Not as a husband anymore, but as a strategist mapping enemy movements. She glanced up once. "You're quiet this morning," she said, stirring her latte. "Just thinking," he replied, sliding his laptop shut. "About work?" she teased. "Always." She smiled, relieved, mistaking his stillness for the same predictable calm she'd long stopped respecting. But beneath that silence, something dangerous had shifted. Ethan's phone buzzed softly in his pocket. A message from Clara Monroe, his longtime legal counsel and one of the few people he trusted. "Accountant ready. Meet at noon." He replied with a single word. "Proceed." Hours later, Ethan sat across from Clara in a corner office overlooking the skyline. She was precise, poised, and too sharp to ask personal questions. Still, her eyes hinted at concern. "You're sure you want to do this quietly?" Ethan nodded. "She can't know anything until it's done. No confrontation, no emotion. I want to be invisible." Clara folded her arms. "And the reason?" He looked out the window, jaw set. "Because if she believes she's winning, she'll expose everything." Clara exhaled, opening a file. "Your joint accounts, your investments, and your trust funds are accessible through shared authorizations. If she's been moving money, we'll trace it." Ethan's eyes didn't waver. "She has. I need to know where." Within hours, Clara's contact, a forensic accountant named Miles Denham, compiled a detailed ledger. Lines of numbers, wire transfers, and coded descriptions filled the page. Among them, one name appeared again and again. Heart Care Foundation. Ethan frowned. "What's that?" Miles turned his monitor toward him. "Supposedly a charity for cardiovascular research, but it's a shell. The routing number leads to a medical trust registered under Julian Cross, MD. Ethan's fingers clenched slightly around his coffee cup. "She's funding him." Clara watched him, cautious. "Do you want me to freeze it?" "No," Ethan said calmly. "I want her to think I haven't noticed. Let her build her castle. I'll take the ground under it." That night, Vanessa came home late, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't Ethan's. She walked into the living room, her heels echoing against the tiles. Ethan looked up from his desk. "You're late," he said casually. "Board meeting ran long," she lied smoothly, kissing his cheek. "You know how it is." Ethan smiled faintly, eyes unreadable. "Of course." She poured herself wine and sat on the couch, scrolling through photos of her and Julian on her hidden account. He watched from a reflection in the glass cabinet, her grin, her thumb lingering on a picture of Julian holding her waist in a dim restaurant. "You seem happy," he said suddenly. She startled, nearly dropping her glass. "What?" "I said," Ethan repeated gently, "you seem happy lately." Her lips curved into a nervous smile. "Just tired, that's all." Ethan nodded. "You should rest. We'll have a long week ahead." As she headed upstairs, he stayed behind, watching the red wine swirl in her glass. His phone vibrated again. A message from Clara. Everything confirmed. She's been transferring weekly. Do you want to proceed with phase 2? Ethan typed slowly. Yes. File the preliminary petition in Nevada. Keep it sealed. In the quiet that followed, he walked into the study, shutting the door softly behind him. The rain had begun again. Soft, steady, like a heartbeat against the glass. He sat at his desk, opened his private notes, and wrote a single sentence under the word plan. When she sleeps with betrayal, make her wake up to absence. He closed the notebook and turned off the light. Upstairs, Vanessa laughed softly into her phone, whispering, I miss you already. Morning sunlight spilled across the floor of Ethan Caldwell's home office, glinting off the surface of his watch as he reviewed the legal drafts spread before him. The room was silent except for the faint whir of the air conditioner and the measured rhythm of his breathing. On the desk sat a stack of documents labeled Petition for Dissolution of Marriage, Nevada. He read each page carefully, eyes cold, detached. His signature would end 12 years of marriage without a word spoken. It wasn't an act of rage. It was strategy. Every clause had been positioned to protect him. Asset division voided in the event of infidelity. Joint accounts frozen under silent fiduciary clauses. Child custody prearranged. Across the page, the date of filing was already 6 months old. Clara Monroe had seen to that. Ethan picked up the pen. His hand didn't shake. When he signed his name, he didn't feel loss, only clarity. He exhaled, leaned back, and whispered to himself, It's done. That afternoon, he met Clara in her downtown office. She stood behind her desk, composed, holding a manila envelope. It's finalized, she said quietly. As of last week, you're no longer legally married. Vanessa Caldwell has no idea. We filed in Nevada using residency through your holding company. She won't discover it until she tries to touch your assets. Ethan nodded. And the accounts? All shifted to the trust, Clara replied. Your sister Avery is the trustee. Every cent is protected. Vanessa still sees the balances, but the ownership has already changed. She's spending from an account that's legally no longer hers. Ethan's mouth twitched into a faint, humorless smile. Good. Let her enjoy the illusion. Clara studied him for a long moment. You're certain you want to keep pretending? You could confront her now. End it cleanly. Ethan's eyes hardened. No, she thrives on attention. If I fight her openly, she wins the narrative. This isn't revenge through anger, Clara. This is correction through silence. Back at home, Vanessa floated through her perfect little kingdom. The manicured lawns, the glass staircase, the wardrobe that could pay off mortgages. She just returned from a lunch with Julian, giggling as she texted him. He's so clueless. I'll be free soon, and you'll finally get what you deserve, me and everything he built. That night, she poured herself wine and went over her plans. A second home in Miami, her name already scribbled on mock property forms. She had no idea her name was legally gone from everything. Ethan watched her from the study doorway, unseen. She looked radiant in the glow of her false security, laughing softly into her phone. Every gesture, every smile, every careless word was fuel. He turned away and sent a message to his accountant. Proceed to full transfer. Completion by midnight. By the next morning, the move was complete. $400 million, company shares, real estate, offshore accounts, trust holdings, all reassigned under the Avery Caldwell Irrevocable Trust. Vanessa still had access to a debit card and saw no difference in her statements, but in the digital ecosystem of banking, she no longer existed. Ethan sat at his desk as confirmation emails arrived one after another. Transaction complete, beneficiary updated, account secured. The last notification blinked across the screen, and he exhaled, a breath of freedom disguised as calm. He stared at his reflection in the black screen of his monitor. He looked tired, yes, but awake in a way he hadn't been in years. He whispered to himself, this isn't about what she did. It's about what she'll learn. That evening, Vanessa walked into his office wearing a satin dress, holding 2 glasses of champagne. To us, she smiled, setting one down, to everything we've built. Ethan raised his glass slowly, meeting her gaze. To everything we've built, he echoed softly. She laughed, eyes gleaming, unaware that we no longer existed in any legal sense. When she turned to leave, he called after her. Vanessa, he said, his tone even. She paused. Yes? Ethan smiled gently. If something you loved was slipping away, would you notice before it was gone? She frowned, confused. What are you talking about? He shook his head. Just thinking aloud. She rolled her eyes. You're always thinking, she teased and walked upstairs. Ethan watched her silhouette fade into the hallway light. The woman who thought she owned his empire. The wife who didn't realize she was already divorced. The betrayer who was still smiling in borrowed air. He closed the door behind her, poured himself another drink, and whispered, 1 move down, 9 to go. The weekend began with champagne. Vanessa stood before the full-length mirror, admiring the emerald silk dress that clung to her waist and shimmered under the light. She ran her fingers over her necklace, a recent gift from Julian, and smiled faintly at her reflection. Downstairs, the house buzzed with laughter and music. The staff had been dismissed early. The night was meant to feel intimate. Only a few trusted friends had been invited, though none knew the real reason for the gathering. It wasn't Ethan's charity dinner, as she'd told her family. It was a private celebration for Julian's new clinic, secretly funded through the money she siphoned from the joint account. At the rooftop terrace of the Asteria Hotel, candles flickered in glass cylinders, overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Vanessa arrived first, her heels echoing against the marble floor. Moments later, Julian entered, sharp in a tailored navy suit, his smile full of the arrogance of a man who believed he'd stolen another's world. He leaned in, kissed her cheek, and whispered, "To us." "To us," she echoed softly, clinking her glass against his. A server approached. "Ms. Caldwell, your reservation has been confirmed for the private suite upstairs." Julian grinned. "Perfect. Let's celebrate properly." As they walked toward the elevator, Vanessa laughed. Carefree, reckless, radiant. "Ethan still thinks I'm in Connecticut visiting my parents," she said. "He doesn't question anything. He's too busy saving the world." Julian smirked. "Let him. The more distracted he is, the easier this gets. You'll have everything soon." They disappeared into the private elevator, champagne glasses in hand. Neither noticed the small black camera hidden inside the crystal chandelier above them, nor the silent man sitting in a car across the street, eyes fixed on the live feed streaming to his tablet. Ethan watched in silence. His private investigator, Logan Pierce, sat beside him, adjusting the camera's focus. "You sure you want to see this, sir?" Ethan didn't answer. On the screen, Vanessa leaned across the table, her hand sliding over Julian's. Their laughter filled the room. She looked weightless, the way she used to look when she was still his. Logan zoomed in slightly. "Got clear footage, audio too. This'll hold in court. Multiple meetings, money transfers, emotional intimacy. Enough for a marital fraud case." Ethan's expression didn't change. "Keep recording," he said quietly. "Every word." Logan hesitated. "You've already got what you need. Why not end it now?" Ethan's eyes stayed on the screen. "Because she hasn't reached her peak yet. You can't take down a queen until she feels untouchable." Inside the suite, Vanessa twirled a pen between her fingers, signing mock business documents for Julian's expansion. "It's crazy how easy it was," she said. "I just moved the money from one account to another, label it as a foundation expense, and no one notices. Ethan never checks details." Julian laughed. "Smart and beautiful. You deserve every cent, baby." She leaned forward and kissed him. "And soon he'll sign the official transfer papers himself. He trusts me completely." Ethan's voice from the car was almost a whisper. "Trust. The only thing she's ever managed to bankrupt." Logan turned to him. "Do you want me to intercept the next transfer?" Ethan shook his head. "Not yet. Let her think she's winning. The next move comes when she laughs about it in public. That's when I'll take everything." Hours later, as rain drizzled over the city, Vanessa stepped out of the elevator with Julian's jacket draped over her shoulders. They kissed once more before parting, promising to meet next week. Her smile was radiant, almost cruel. From across the street, Ethan's car headlights flickered once as he started the engine. She didn't see him drive away, didn't see the reflection of her own betrayal playing silently on a monitor in his passenger seat. He reached for the USB drive, labeled it Evidence A, and slipped it into an envelope. On the front, he wrote 4 words, "The night she celebrated." He looked up through the windshield, his face illuminated by passing lights. "Let her have her moment," he murmured. "It'll make the fall cinematic." As the car merged into the stream of traffic, the city stretched ahead, bright, loud, alive. Behind him, the camera continued recording the rooftop terrace, where Vanessa's laughter echoed faintly through the rain, unaware that the countdown to her downfall had already begun. The morning of Ethan Caldwell's 42nd birthday began with polished smiles and hollow laughter. Vanessa had planned everything herself, a lavish surprise dinner in their mansion's grand hall, a guest list filled with her friends, not his, and a theme so extravagant it looked more like a coronation than a celebration. The dining room shimmered under the crystal chandelier. Golden candles reflected in tall glassware, and a pianist filled the air with a melody too delicate for the tension it tried to hide. Vanessa floated between guests in a crimson gown, her laughter loud enough to drown her conscience. She looked every bit the devoted wife, the perfect American hostess whose life revolved around her husband's success. Every guest whispered about how lucky Ethan was, but Ethan knew luck had nothing to do with it. He sat at the end of the long mahogany table, surrounded by people who thought they were celebrating him, but every clink of glass, every toast, every word of praise felt like theater. He had invited none of them. They were all hers, friends of her lover, employees of her illusion. "Happy birthday to my brilliant husband," Vanessa said, standing with a bright smile and a crystal glass raised high. "The man who gave me everything I ever dreamed of." Applause, cheers, flashes from cameras. Ethan stood, returning a polite nod. "Thank you, everyone," he said, voice steady. "To my wife, for always surprising me." Vanessa's smile widened, mistaking his tone for affection. "Speaking of surprises," she said, lifting a wrapped box from the table. "This is for you." She handed it to him with practiced sweetness, knowing how to perform affection when eyes were on her. Ethan peeled the silver paper and found a wristwatch inside. Sleek, expensive, engraved with the words, "To forever, Fee." He stared at the inscription for a long, silent moment before fastening the watch onto his wrist. "Beautiful," he said. "Do you like it?" she asked, proud, her friends leaning closer to watch. Ethan's smile was small, almost tender. "I do. It's a reminder that forever doesn't always mean together." The laughter around the table dimmed slightly, replaced by confusion. Vanessa blinked, uncertain. "What do you mean?" Ethan set down his glass and reached for a brown envelope beside his chair. The pianist's melody faltered, notes dissolving into silence. He slid the envelope across the table toward her. "This is my gift to you." Vanessa hesitated. "What is this?" "Open it," Ethan said calmly. The air thickened. Forks stopped moving. A few guests exchanged wary glances as Vanessa tore the envelope open. Inside were documents, DNA reports, lab seals, photographs, and official signatures. Her eyes darted across the pages, confusion curdling into panic. "What is this?" she whispered again, voice trembling now. "Proof," Ethan said softly, "that our 2 youngest children aren't mine." The color drained from her face. "That's insane," he interrupted, his tone still unnervingly calm. "The tests were done quietly. 3 times. Same result." A stunned silence filled the room. The only sound was the faint creak of her chair as she leaned back, trembling. He continued, voice low and deliberate. "For years I wondered what happened to us. Why you drifted away. Why you laughed at things I didn't understand. I blame myself, but it wasn't me, was it?" Vanessa's friends looked away. Julian's name hung in the unspoken air. She tried to recover, her voice sharp. "You had no right to—" Ethan's eyes locked onto hers, steady and cold. "No right to what? To the truth? To know the children I raised weren't mine?" Her words caught in her throat. He reached for his glass and lifted it, as if in a toast. "To honesty," he said quietly. "The one thing you never gave me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the chandelier light seemed to dim. Vanessa's lip trembled, but she forced a brittle smile. Ethan, let's not do this in front of everyone. Please. He smiled faintly, stepping close enough that only she could hear his next words. You threw away a marriage for a fantasy, Vanessa? But what you don't know is that you've already lost everything else too. She frowned, bewildered. What do you mean? You'll find out soon enough, he said, then turned to the guests, his composure unbroken. Thank you for coming, he announced. My wife needs rest. The celebration is over. The room fell into chaos as murmurs rose and people began filing out awkwardly. Vanessa stood frozen, clutching the documents with trembling hands. When the door finally closed, she turned to him. Ethan, what did you do? He looked at her one last time, eyes empty of the man she once knew. Just what you taught me, he said softly. I learned from the best. He walked past her, leaving the echo of his footsteps and the sound of her breath breaking in the silence. The watch she'd given him ticked steadily, the sound of time catching up with her. The next morning, the mansion was quiet. Too quiet. Vanessa woke with a pounding headache, mascara still smudged from the night before. The red gown she'd worn to Ethan's birthday party lay crumpled across the floor like evidence of a crime. She turned in bed, expecting to find Ethan beside her, but his side was cold. She reached for her phone, blinking against the morning light, and froze. Her screen was filled with missed calls from her lawyer, 2 from the bank and 1 from Julian. A strange unease twisted in her stomach. She ignored the calls and opened her banking app. Then her hand went still. Balance. 0 euro. She blinked hard, refreshing the screen. Then again, and again. The same number glared back. 0. Every account she could access, checking, savings, investment, joint, offshore, gone. A scream rose in her throat. No, no, no! She scrambled out of bed, her hair tangled, her robe barely tied, dialing the bank manager with shaking hands. Mrs. Caldwell, the man's voice was careful, nervous. I'm afraid the account ownership has been transferred. All transactions were legally authorized by Mr. Caldwell under trust law. As of 3 days ago, you are no longer— What do you mean no longer? She snapped, pacing the room. That's my account. Ma'am, the banker hesitated, our records show your name is no longer associated with any of the joint holdings. I'm very sorry. The call ended before he could say more. Vanessa's body trembled. She opened her drawer and pulled out jewelry cases. Empty. The safe behind the painting, unlocked, cleared. Even her emerald necklace, the one Julian loved, was gone. She ran through the house barefoot, slamming doors, shouting Ethan's name. He was nowhere. The only thing she found on his desk was a sealed envelope. Her shaking fingers tore it open. Inside was a single page, her wedding photo printed beside her forged signature. At the bottom, a single line of text in Ethan's handwriting. Check the date. She looked at the timestamp. 6 months ago. Her breath hitched. She scanned the header, State of Nevada, petition for dissolution of marriage. Her knees buckled. No, this can't be real. Panicking, she grabbed her phone and called Julian. He answered after 3 rings, his voice curt. Vanessa, not now. Julian, everything's gone. The money, the accounts. Ethan, he's done something. Silence, then a low sigh. I told you not to move too fast, Julian said sharply. You were careless. The transfers got flagged. The clinic's being audited. Her voice cracked. What are you talking about? You said everything was legal. Not anymore, he hissed. The feds froze my business this morning. I can't help you right now. Julian, she screamed, you can't leave me like this. But the line went dead. Her hands trembled as she called back again and again. No answer. When she tried to open the clinic's website, it was gone. When she checked his Instagram, deleted. By noon, she realized she'd been ghosted. The man she'd risked everything for had vanished. Hours later, she drove to the downtown branch of Caldwell Industries, still in her robe and sunglasses, storming into the reception area. Where's my husband? She demanded. The receptionist hesitated, then said softly, I'm sorry, ma'am, but Mr. Caldwell is no longer on site. He left instructions that you are not to access any company property. Excuse me, Vanessa spat. The woman gestured toward a monitor behind the desk. On it played a looping company news segment. Ethan Caldwell transfers majority of his $400 million holdings into charitable trust for employee welfare. Vanessa's breath stopped. The screen flashed an image of Ethan, calm and composed, shaking hands with city officials. The caption read, "Caldwell Foundation, Building Integrity Through Transparency." Vanessa stumbled back, whispering, "He turned the money into charity?" Her vision blurred. She walked out in a daze, her heels echoing down the marble hallway. Outside, reporters were already gathering near the curb. One of them recognized her and shouted, "Mrs. Caldwell, is it true your husband's charity move was part of your divorce settlement?" Divorce. The word hit her like a bullet. She froze as flashes exploded around her. The perfect wife, now cornered, broke, and exposed. The paparazzi swarmed, yelling questions she couldn't answer. She pushed through them, eyes wide, breath trembling, voice breaking. When she finally reached her car, she collapsed against the steering wheel, sobbing. Her phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "Ethan, when you destroy something pure, don't be surprised when purity learns to destroy you back." Her tears blurred the words. She threw the phone aside and screamed, the sound echoing through the car as the city kept moving, indifferent. That night, the lights of the Caldwell mansion went out for the first time in years. Vanessa sat alone in the dark, staring at the divorce papers she'd found that morning. Her reflection in the window looked like a stranger, desperate, hollow, defeated. She whispered to herself, "He took everything." But the truth was worse. He hadn't just taken everything. He'd left her with nothing that could be bought back. The courthouse in downtown Manhattan was packed to capacity. Reporters, photographers, and curious onlookers filled every corner, whispering as the doors swung open. Headlines had already spread like wildfire. Ex-wife sues billionaire for half his empire. Caldwell divorce turns explosive. Vanessa stepped out of the black car dressed in a fitted gray suit and dark sunglasses. Her walk was poised, her chin high, but her hands trembled inside her clutch. To the world, she wanted to look like a woman wronged, not the wife who'd lost everything to her own greed. Inside, the courtroom felt colder than the marble floors. Ethan sat at the defense table, his expression calm, flanked by Clara Monroe and her legal team. He looked like a man completely at peace, the kind of calm that comes only after certainty. Vanessa's attorney, Howard Leeds, adjusted his tie and leaned toward her. "Stick to the script. You're the victim. You loved him. You trusted him." She nodded, eyes locked on Ethan, the man she once controlled. "He won't win," she whispered. "He can't." Howard rose as the judge entered. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Vanessa Caldwell, was deceived and financially manipulated. Her husband secretly divorced her, drained their accounts, and left her destitute." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The judge, a composed woman in her 50s, raised a brow. "Is that correct, Mr. Caldwell?" Clara stood, crisp and measured. "Your Honor, the divorce was legal, finalized 6 months prior to Mrs. Caldwell's knowledge, with full judicial authorization under Nevada state law. As for the finances, the accounts in question were legally protected through a trust long before any claims of misconduct." Howard scoffed. "Protected? You mean hidden?" Clara's tone sharpened. "Hidden would imply guilt. What we have, Your Honor, is foresight, necessary when one's spouse is committing marital fraud." The judge's gavel struck once. "Let's maintain order." Vanessa's turn came. She took the stand, tears perfectly placed, voice trembling just enough for sympathy. "He left me with nothing," she said. "I gave him everything. I raised our children while he worked. I supported his dreams. Then one morning I woke up and my life was gone." Howard handed her a tissue. "And did you have any idea your husband was planning this?" She shook her head, eyes glistening. "None. I thought we were happy." Ethan sat silently, eyes fixed on her, as if studying a stranger. When it was Clara's turn to cross-examine, the air thickened. She approached slowly, holding a tablet. Mrs. Caldwell, she began, her tone polite but edged with steel. You said you were unaware of your husband's financial actions, correct? Yes, Vanessa replied quickly. Clara tapped the tablet. The courtroom screen lit up. Surveillance footage from the Asteria Hotel rooftop. Vanessa's laughter filled the room. Julian's voice followed. He's so predictable. You'll have everything soon. The courtroom erupted. Vanessa's face drained of color. Clara continued calmly. Is that your voice, Mrs. Caldwell? Vanessa stammered. This was taken out of context. And the money transferred to Dr. Julian Cross's clinic? Clara pressed. Also out of context. Vanessa froze. The silence was unbearable. Ethan didn't move. His face remained unreadable, though his eyes carried something colder than anger. Truth. Howard jumped up. Objection. Overruled, the judge said sharply. Clara clicked to the next slide. One more thing, Your Honor. She held up a document. DNA results, confirming that the two youngest children born during this marriage are not biologically related to Mr. Caldwell. The audience gasped audibly. Reporters scribbled furiously. Vanessa's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Caldwell, is this true? Tears streaked her face. He wasn't supposed to find out, she whispered. Clara stepped back. He wasn't supposed to find out, or you never intended for him to? Vanessa's silence was answer enough. Ethan finally rose. His voice was calm, steady, almost compassionate. Your Honor, he said, I don't want to punish her. I only want closure. The woman sitting there is not the one I married. I trusted her with everything. My name, my children, my heart. She turned all three into weapons. The judge nodded solemnly. Given the evidence presented, this court rules in favor of Mr. Caldwell. All claims to the estate are denied. The court recognizes the divorce as finalized, and all trust assets remain under Mr. Caldwell's control. The gavel struck. Vanessa let out a broken cry. Her lawyer whispered, We'll appeal, but she didn't respond. She stared at Ethan, the man she once mocked as weak, now walking past her. Untouchable. As he reached the door, she called out through her tears, Ethan, please, don't leave me like this. He paused only for a moment. When he finally turned, his voice was almost gentle. You left me long before I walked away. Then he was gone. Outside, the cameras exploded in flashes as Ethan stepped into the sunlight. Composed, resolute, victorious. Behind him, the courtroom doors closed, sealing her humiliation inside. The news of the courtroom verdict traveled faster than any headline could capture. By morning, the Caldwell name was everywhere. Not for innovation or charity, but for betrayal. DNA scandal shocks, Caldwell family. Billionaire's wife exposed in court. At their oldest son's private school, whispers followed Alex Caldwell, 14 years old, through every hallway. His friends avoided eye contact. Teachers spoke in hushed tones. At lunch, a boy slid his phone across the table, showing him a photo of his mother leaving the courthouse in tears. Hey, isn't that your mom? Alex's chest tightened. He snatched the phone, saw the headline, and froze. Two of Caldwell's children fathered by wife's lover. He dropped the phone and bolted for the exit, the laughter behind him echoing like knives. That afternoon, Ethan waited in the car outside the school, his hands folded on the steering wheel. He saw Alex emerge, his face pale, eyes red, shoulders shaking. Ethan stepped out quietly. Alex, the boy stopped. Dad, his voice cracked. Is it true? Ethan's throat tightened. He'd rehearsed 1,000 ways to explain this, but none felt right. He crouched down to meet his son's eyes. Some of it, yes, but you're mine. You always have been. Alex looked away. And Caleb? And Emma? Ethan hesitated, the silence confirming what the boy already knew. Alex's lip trembled. So, she lied to all of us? Ethan nodded softly. For years. Tears filled the boy's eyes. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder. Because I wanted to protect what was left of your childhood. I didn't want you to see what she became. Alex swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. Where is she now? Ethan's gaze drifted toward the city skyline. probably calling every lawyer she can find. Alex looked up, his young voice cold for the first time. I don't ever want to see her again. Ethan's heart cracked a little at that. Not because he disagreed, but because the words sounded exactly like his own thoughts, only younger, sharper, purer. Meanwhile, Vanessa sat alone in her mother's apartment, blinds drawn, TV muted. Her once flawless hair hung loose, her eyes swollen. On the table before her were stacks of newspapers, each headline slicing deeper. Her phone buzzed. She lunged for it, Julian's number. Relief flickered in her chest. She answered breathlessly. Julian? But the voice on the other end wasn't his. This is Agent Russo, FBI Financial Crimes Division, the voice said. Dr. Julian Cross is currently under federal investigation for embezzlement and medical fraud. You are listed as a co-signer on multiple offshore accounts. We'll be issuing a summons for questioning. Vanessa froze. Wait, what? I didn't know. I suggest you get a lawyer, Mrs. Caldwell. The line went dead. She sank into the couch, numb. Her reflection staring back from the black TV screen. Her own image disgusted her. The expensive woman with nothing left. That evening, the rain returned. Ethan sat by the fireplace, Alex asleep on the couch beside him. The boy's head rested against his shoulder, his breathing soft, calm for the first time in days. Ethan looked down at him and whispered, You didn't deserve this. None of us did. He reached for his phone and opened a new message draft addressed to Vanessa. He knows. Please don't contact him. Let him heal. He stared at the screen for a long moment before deleting the words. No message could fix what she'd broken. He turned instead to Clara Monroe, who sat across the room reviewing paperwork. She looked up. You did the right thing, Ethan. Doesn't feel like it, he murmured. Justice rarely does, she replied softly. He nodded, exhaling deeply. Tomorrow, I'll start transferring the foundation's funds to launch officially. If I'm going to rebuild, it'll be for him. Clara smiled faintly. And that's why you won. Across town, Vanessa stood in the rain outside the gated mansion that used to be hers. She rang the intercom, soaked and shivering. After a long pause, a voice came through. Ethan's, calm but distant. You shouldn't be here. Please, she whispered, tears mixing with the rain. Just let me see him. Just once. Ethan was silent for several seconds, then said, He doesn't want to see you. Her knees buckled. Ethan, I'm begging you. The line clicked dead. The gate light turned red and the rain grew heavier, drowning out the sound of her sobs. Inside the mansion, Alex stirred slightly, whispering in his sleep, Dad, don't leave. Ethan brushed his son's hair gently. I'm right here, he whispered, and I'm not going anywhere. But as the fire flickered low, his eyes hardened with a quiet truth. Forgiveness wasn't coming. Not soon. Maybe not ever. He stared into the flames and said softly, She built her world on lies. Now she'll learn what it means to live in truth. Alone. By autumn, the storm around Vanessa Caldwell had consumed everything she'd once called her life. Her name was no longer whispered in admiration, only in scandal. Every newspaper headline carried a different shade of her disgrace. Caldwell ex-wife faces federal inquiry. Dr. Cross flees country after fraud exposure. Ex-socialite loses mansion, assets. In custody in divorce fallout. The penthouse she once bragged about now sat empty, repossessed by the bank. The luxury cars were gone, auctioned off to settle debts. Even her diamond rings were seized as evidence in the fraud case that now bore her name. She moved into a small rental apartment on the outskirts of Brooklyn, a far cry from the life of glittering champagne and gala nights. Her neighbors didn't know who she was. The ones who recognized her only whispered behind their doors. The silence was her new punishment. One evening, Vanessa sat on her bare couch, staring at a flickering TV screen. A news anchor's voice filled the room. Ethan Caldwell, founder of Caldwell Technologies, has announced a new $50 million charity fund aimed at supporting single fathers and victims of financial betrayal. The screen showed Ethan standing on a stage, dressed in a dark suit, his composure effortless. Behind him, the banner read, The Caldwell Foundation for Truth. Applause thundered. Cameras flashed. He smiled calmly and said, "Sometimes life takes everything from you, but if you're patient enough, it will show you why." Vanessa's eyes welled. Her hands clenched the couch cushion until her knuckles turned white. That speech was meant for her. Every syllable, every breath of it. She threw the remote at the TV. The screen cracked, but his image remained, fractured but still there, just like the memory of him. The knock on the door came the next morning. She opened it to find FBI agent Russo holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said formally, "we have a warrant to search your residence. We're investigating your financial involvement with Dr. Julian Cross." Vanessa stepped back, panic rising. "I told you, I didn't know what he was doing. I was just helping him." "Using stolen funds," Russo cut in. "The transactions were routed through your joint accounts. You signed off on them." "I thought they were donations," she cried. "Julian told me." He handed her a folded sheet of paper. "He also told us you were his financial partner. You'll need to come with us for questioning." Her legs nearly gave out. "He betrayed me," she whispered. Russo's expression softened just a fraction. "Maybe, but the law doesn't care who lied first." As they led her away, flashes of cameras erupted outside. Her neighbors watched from their windows as the woman who once dined with governors was escorted into a black SUV, not to a gala, but to federal court. Days later, the tabloids published photos of her in tears, leaving the courthouse in handcuffs. The captions were brutal. "The mistress of deception faces her own music. Betrayal comes full circle." Ethan didn't speak publicly about it. He didn't need to. His silence had already said everything. Weeks later, after her bail was posted, Vanessa sat alone at a diner off Fifth Avenue. Her makeup was gone, her nails chipped, her once perfect hair tied into a messy knot. No one recognized her anymore. On the TV above the counter, another news story aired. The Caldwell Foundation expands internationally. Ethan Caldwell to receive the National Integrity Award. The camera showed him walking the red carpet with Clara Monroe beside him, his new fiancée. The crowd cheered as they smiled, radiant, unstoppable. Vanessa stared at the screen in disbelief. The woman who'd once been his lawyer was now the woman by his side. The waitress approached quietly. "Refill, ma'am?" Vanessa blinked back tears. "No, I'm done." She left a crumpled dollar on the table and walked into the cold evening air, her breath visible in the glow of the city lights. Across the street, a massive billboard glowed. The Caldwell Foundation, building a future on truth. She stopped, watching Ethan's face light up 20 feet tall above her. For the first time, she realized the depth of his revenge. He hadn't destroyed her out of hate. He'd let her destroy herself. Back in his office, Ethan watched the city skyline from his glass balcony. Clara entered quietly, handing him a document. "It's official," she said. "Vanessa's case has been closed. She pled guilty to falsifying accounts. No jail time, just community service." Ethan nodded slowly. "That's enough." "You're letting her go?" Clara asked. He turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "She's already serving her sentence. She has to live with herself." Clara stepped closer. "Do you regret it?" Ethan looked out at the skyline, the city glowing, endless, alive. "No," he said softly. "I regret not seeing who she really was sooner." He reached into his drawer and pulled out the engraved watch she'd given him, the one that read "To Forever," DOV. He turned it in his hand for a moment, then set it down beside a framed photo of Alex. "Forever," he murmured, "was just shorter than I thought." Outside, the night hummed with the sound of traffic and the faint echo of a life he'd buried. But this time, Ethan Caldwell wasn't the one walking away from ruin. He was the one rebuilding an empire on the ashes of betrayal. Winter wrapped Manhattan in silver and light. Snow dusted the sidewalks as black cars lined up before the Grand Aurelius Hotel, where the year's most exclusive charity gala was underway. The banners read, "The Caldwell Foundation Annual Fundraiser, Empowering Fathers, Rebuilding Families." Inside, chandeliers shimmered over tuxedos and glittering gowns. Cameramen crowded the red carpet, their flashes bursting like fireworks. At the center of it all stood Ethan Caldwell, dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, flanked by his fiancée Clara Monroe, radiant in a white satin gown. They looked effortless together, calm, composed, untouchable. Reporters called out questions as Ethan smiled for the cameras. "Mr. Caldwell, how does it feel to turn your pain into purpose?" "I learned that sometimes the best revenge," he said, pausing just long enough for the flashes to pop again, "is living with integrity." The crowd applauded. Clara's hand slipped into his, their composure unbreakable. Across the street, hidden in the cold shadow of a side alley, Vanessa Caldwell stood watching. Her coat was old, her makeup smudged, her once polished nails chipped. The frost clung to her lashes as she stared through the glass doors of the ballroom, where her former life danced under golden light. She wasn't on the guest list. She wasn't on any list anymore. Through the glass, she saw Ethan surrounded by people. Powerful men, laughing women, sponsors, and board members. Every one of them looked at him the way she once did, with admiration, respect, awe. Her throat tightened. She had once been the woman on his arm. Now she was a ghost watching from the cold. Inside, the event reached its peak. A live orchestra played softly as the host approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "please welcome tonight's keynote speaker, Mr. Ethan Caldwell." The applause was thunderous. Ethan walked onto the stage, calm, graceful, every movement calculated yet genuine. Behind him, a massive screen lit up with the foundation's slogan, "Rebuilding lives, one truth at a time." He began, voice steady. "When I started this foundation, it wasn't because I wanted to erase my past. It was because I wanted to honor the truth. The hardest teacher I've ever known. Truth doesn't come softly. It tears, it burns, it exposes, but it also rebuilds." Vanessa pressed her hand against the cold glass outside, tears sliding down her cheeks. She could hear his voice faintly through the doors. He continued, "Tonight, we stand for those who've been betrayed, by those they loved, by systems that failed them, or even by themselves. To every man and woman who has faced deceit and still chosen to rise, this is your night." Applause thundered through the hall. The host returned to the mic. "And before we close, the Caldwell Foundation would like to honor one man who turned his pain into something extraordinary." The screen behind Ethan flickered, showing footage of smiling families, fathers reunited with children, scholarships awarded to single parents. Each image was another layer of his redemption. But then, one final image appeared, a photograph from years ago. Ethan and Vanessa, arm in arm, on their wedding day. The audience murmured softly. Ethan turned, gazing at the screen for a long moment. Then he spoke quietly, his voice carrying through the hall. "Once I believed forever was built on promises. Now I know it's built on truth. And sometimes truth arrives the moment love leaves." He raised his glass. "To new beginnings, and to those who taught us what to never be again." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Clara touched his arm gently, her smile proud but knowing. Outside, Vanessa couldn't move. The sound of applause felt like a storm pounding against her chest. Through the glass, she saw Ethan kiss Clara's forehead as the cameras flashed. The man who once belonged to her now stood as everything she destroyed, and everything she could never become again. She turned away slowly, pulling her worn coat tighter, disappearing into the crowd of people who didn't recognize her. The snow fell heavier now, soft and relentless, muffling the sounds of celebration behind her. Inside, Ethan watched the doors for a brief second, as if he'd felt something, a ghost of the past passing by. Then he looked back at the crowd, eyes calm, steady. Clara whispered beside him, "Are you okay?" He nodded. "Perfectly." As the orchestra swelled and the crowd applauded again, he slipped the engraved watch from his wrist to Forever, V, and placed it quietly on the podium. He left it there, a relic of what once was, and walked off stage to begin the life that betrayal had built for him. Behind him, the watch ticked once more, then stopped, its sound drowned in applause. Downstairs, Ethan smiled to himself in the darkness. "So do I," he murmured. but only one of them knew the game had begun,